Hi everyone, I'm Tally, this is Farrell and we are bored of it, and welcome to our review of Stationfall, the game that's been described as a party game for hardcore gamers. But is that true? Well, we're not going to tell you just yet. Firstly, we're going to tell you a bit about Stationfall. So it's for 1 to 9 players and it will have you on board a rather zany space station, which is currently free falling towards Earth. And in about 15 minutes, it's going to hit the atmosphere and disintegrate. So is the goal to escape? Well, not exactly, and not always.
And that is because the station is inhabited by a cast of weird and very unique characters. And each one of these characters has unique goals they would like to see completed. And the players will each secretly be one of these characters. And one example of some of these goals is a botanist, and his main goal is to feed as many people to his carnivorous plant as possible and then escape with the plant. So the twist comes in that there's a number of characters all available for activation, and any player can control any character, at least at the beginning of the game. And that's a big part of how you go about your goals and kind of keep the social deception element in play by working around your character. So in short, Stationfall is a drama-causing, hilarious, story-generating sandbox of a board game.
First, you'll put a number of station inhabitants into play. That will depend on the player count, and then you'll set up the board as directed, as often the characters will add something to the board other than themselves. Then you'll deal each player 2 identity cards. One they'll select as their main character, and the other one will be their bonus character, who will give them points depending on whether they live or die, whichever the card says.
And each character is going to have a unique list of goals they want to accomplish. And each goal will be worth a variable number of points. Some will be standalone, some will reward you with a point for every time you do the thing, and others are dependent on previous goals. Like if you need to escape the station, you might get some extra points for escaping with a certain item. The first thing you can do on your turn is reveal your character if you want to. Revealing will give that character special powers, but if you do or you don't, the next part will be to place influence on any character in the game. Influence makes that character a conspirator, and it will allow you to take actions with them. And finally, you'll be able to take actions with one of your conspirators. You'll place your activation disc on that character, and you can take 2 actions with them, or 1 if they already have an activation disc on them, because then they're tired. Now, there are 20 to 30 actions in the game, so obviously we're not going to go through them all, but for the most part, they're quite simple and self-explanatory. Pick up, drop, move, attack, and activate the room you're in to do the one thing it does. Now, each of these characters has special abilities and reveal powers, and you're going to need to make the most of what they can do and where they are to see your plans come to fruition.
The game will last a variable number of rounds depending on the player count, or it might end if somebody makes the station explode. Each round is represented by 1 minute in the game, and in each minute every player will take a turn. At Stationfall, you'll count up all of the character points as well as any bonus points collected through various things. It's worth noting that this can be played cooperatively, competitively, in teams, and you can even throw in some bots to fill up the numbers. First up, just know that Stationfall is as zany as it sounds, which in many ways is great. It's thematic, it's fun, it's raucous, and it will provide you with some very memorable games. But on the other side of the coin, there's a lot going on, which does create a barrier to entry and a bit of a weird discrepancy to how simple the average turn is versus how difficult it actually is to achieve your goals and to understand all of the systems in play, because there are really a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 4 types of data, you've got different ways of escaping, you've got hazards, you've got contaminations, you've got unique gameplay elements based on which characters are in play. The characters themselves have unique abilities, they have reveal powers, and there's compromats and on and on and on, right? And the thing is that actually there are some elements of this we've barely even interacted with, despite playing many times, because a lot of what you do interact with is based on which secret character you have, which is great for replayability, but obviously it makes it a real bear to teach for new players because you can't know what's going to be relevant to someone, so you have to teach them absolutely everything that could possibly happen in the game, which is quite overwhelming.
Taking the characters as an example, each one will usually have 2 abilities, which may be common to other characters across the game, or they might be completely unique. You'll activate a few characters throughout the game and you'll interact with even more. So keeping track of just this one gameplay element can be a bit of a job, let alone keeping track of everything going on in the rest of the game. Essentially, this is a game that is best played with the same group repeatedly, because once you know it, nothing is overly complex, and you can have some real robust, quick moving games.
Importantly, this barrier to entry is worth it because all these characters and all of these gameplay elements merge together to create a proper sandbox experience, something that's very hard to do in a board game. And all of these elements mean that players really have free rein in how they go about their goals, making them feel very clever when they do accomplish them in their own way. And the mix of these unique characters with these unique gameplay elements also means that every game is very unique, and it honestly is the type of game that's going to create water cooler moments.
We absolutely love the thematic flavour here. You know, you've got a daredevil who wants to free fall from the station, a microbiologist that just wants to spread disease, a lawyer bot who just wants to get as many NDAs signed as possible.
The best character.
Yeah, that's a good one. And we could go on and on. It really makes Stationfall a joy to play and discover. And what's also cool is each character comes with their own little backstory that you can read. And we really appreciate not only are the character goals relatively and generally straightforward to understand, but each character comes with some helpful tips on how you can go about achieving those goals.
Yeah, so with all these characters, none of them are bad, but there are obviously some that you would rather play than others. Maybe their goals are more interesting, maybe they are more varied, maybe they're quite different. But one key thing that you could say annoyed us is some characters have a set number of points. They can get maximum 7, that's it. Others, as we said, they can get a point every time they do something. And I'm sure these are balanced in some way, and there's a design aspect, maybe how difficult the goals are, something like that. But it doesn't feel great when you finish a game and you've maxed out at 7 points and someone across the table has 10 or 11 because they've done really well and can keep doing one thing over and over. And I think a sub-aspect of this is that when you do have these ones which are kind of locked in with, do exactly these things, you can't work around it, it feels more narrow and you can't kind of create these combo big turns as well. And so they're just a little bit, I don't want to say less fun to play, but maybe less rewarding. Furthermore, there's an issue in terms of the social deduction element, which some people might be getting this for, in that I think you have limited returns because of the uniqueness of the characters. If you play several times and you know the characters and their goals, it becomes very easy to figure out who's doing what and why they're doing it and who they are, which some players might not like. And that's also not necessarily a negative, because I think it will create high-level gameplay for experienced groups where you actively have the kind of moves and counter moves and blocking of players as part of that gameplay. But I feel others will find it a little bit frustrating and maybe be a little bit disappointed by the lack of social deception in that case. And a similar issue is, I wonder how much of the fun of Stationfall is down to the novelty of Stationfall. And what I mean by this is the Daredevil has been active and in basically every game we've played of Stationfall. And in the very last game, I was the Daredevil. And I didn't find it particularly interesting to play as a Daredevil because I'd seen them in action so many times. I knew the moves, I knew the strategy. It really just felt like I was going through the numbers. That didn't mean it wasn't a fun experience or a unique experience. It just wasn't nearly as fun for me or interesting as the times where I had a completely unique character to explore and get to grips with.
Now moving on to some design brilliance. The fact that anyone can control any character in play is something special. The whole influence system is quite easy to put aside and not really think about it, but it allows for some real tactical options to emerge. Because you can only activate a character if you have the most or joint most influence cubes on that character, you can literally go on the offensive and add more cubes than you need to just to make life hard for that other player. The whole system creates a lot of laughs as the players vie for control over the characters, and it allows for a fair amount of strategy because everyone only has a limited amount of influence cubes available. It's not a system that will be for everyone though, as it might cause some frustration in some games. In some games, every player's goals are fairly distinct, so it gives you a bit of breathing room, whereas in other games, your character's goals might be the same or quite similar to another player's. So you're just going to bash up against each other and get embroiled in a bit of a tug of war. Some groups might find this pretty funny and just accept it as part of the game, whereas others might find this a bit unfun. And one of the key reasons is that you'll likely only do 1 or 2 actions on your turn, and the rounds in the game are limited. So if you do something and then another player just instantly reverses it, that can be pretty annoying and feel like you just wasted your turn. Because there is limited time and actions in this game, the flow of the game is pretty tight and pressured. Every move and action you make really does count towards achieving your goal, which can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
Lastly, we're going to just quick fire through a few miscellaneous things we wanted to say. 2-player game, surprisingly good, had a lot of fun with it. We'd rather do that than play with the bots, which we found just to be okay, because the script running them is fine, but it increases the frustration when they're doing things that are counteracting what you want to do, because they kind of do it illogically sometimes, in ways that a real player would never do, and it's very frustrating. We'd never play it with a lot of people, the higher player counts, because although turns can be very quick once people know the game, mid to late game, you do tend to think a lot about what you're going to do. You need to read the board, see how it changes, and it becomes quite a thinky game. And if you're doing that on your turn, multiply that by 9, no thank you. Also, if you're interested in getting the miniatures for the game, don't. We're very disappointed. They are not very distinct, and they actively made it harder to read the board. We, after the first game, went back to these wooden tokens with symbology that's really good, far more readable. Don't get them. Lastly, the rules could have been handled better because you kind of have a lot of flavor text and putting things into context from the launch guide, which is basically just teaching you tutorial games, and that's it. And so if you want that flavor, you kind of have to dig around in there to look for it, because the reference guides have all the rules, but they're pretty bare bones. It's like 5.1.1, do this. And I would have actually liked to have seen these for characters as well, because all the characters have different goals and do different things. And you have to pass around this huge giant rule book, which is going to get, back and forth. I think there are just a lot better ways they could have done the rule books, but it's not a deal breaker. Final thoughts? This might have seemed like a bit of a mixed review, but we really enjoy Stationfall. It's something that I actively want to show to new people, despite the barrier to entry, although it would be better to have a regular group. I think it's just that this is a very attractive sounding game, but there are things you kind of want to be aware of before you invest your money in it.
Yeah, and some elements of this might make some people say, no way, not interested, and others might find some frustration. However, this is a real sandbox of a game, providing lots of replayability. It has a really distinct style, lots of clever mechanisms, and lots of uniqueness. But just make sure that it is for you. And if you enjoyed this review, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you're not already, and please feel free to ask us any questions about the game in the comments.
Yep, and most importantly, thank you for watching. See ya.
Bye.